know it's been a long road with this chair, but we've come to the end. This is going to be the final part for this chair. There will be one extra part for studio rendering if you wanted to do that, but this at the end of this video will have a completed, finished model ready to set sail into the world of ArcViz or however you want to use it. So let's finish this material. Let's go to the shading tab at the top here. And I don't like the default view. I think it's weird that it's like horizontally split. To me, that feels wrong. So I just collapse this, I collapse this, and I collapse that. And then I just break this view, split it down the middle, and then I set this to the shader editor. And I would set that as my default, but then all the videos I make would be comments saying, my view doesn't look like yours. So I have to use the defaults. Anyways, so this is our chair. Lovely. This is the node editor here. You may remember that we actually just used the material tab over here. This is for simple changes. If you want to do anything slightly advanced, the node editor is what you use. But they are linked. They are the same thing. If I make a change, over here, you can see that it's updating the node here. So this is like the simplified control version of the full node editor, just FYI. And now I guess I should clear that. There we go. And I'll move this all the way over. Lovely. Okay, so as I said, we finished at the end of the last video just by adding in the color map, and that was so we could see how it was applying to our UVs. Now we're going to complete this material and getting it looking mint. So let's add in those extra maps that we downloaded. So I'm going to go texture. This is Shift A, by the way. Shift A, texture, image texture. Okay, and let's go to where we saved it. So let's start with this one. This is the gloss map. It's a black and white looking map. We'll go ahead and add that. And so a gloss map, for those who don't know, if you're not familiar with what these settings here do, the best video I'm going to assume you have already watched or know what they do. But if you haven't, check out my principled BSDF video where I talk all about that. You can click the little eye in the top right hand corner and you can check that out. But that explains like the science, the physics of how light works, how all that kind of stuff happens. I'm going to assume you know that. So this gloss value here, it goes into your roughness input. So gloss and roughness are the same, but they are inverts of each other. Some software calls the value gloss, others, like Blender, calls it roughness. So if you're using a gloss map and it's going into a roughness input, all you need to do is invert it. So we'll add in a color invert node like so, and they are inverts of each other. So the roughness input, I guess I should have just shown you that, but let's disable the color. And let's set this to black. That just helps you see the reflective properties. Setting it all the way to 0 is going to be like a mirror reflection, and all the way to 1 is going to be like chalk, right? So this basically, when we put this in here, we'll see parts of our mesh that have more roughness, more chalky value, and other parts which are shinier. Now, something to note is that this gloss value, this map here, it's currently not reading it correctly, and that's because the color space is wrong. Whenever you're using a map that isn't basically the color map, anything else that's adding to all these properties down here, you want to change it to non-color data. When you do that, it treats it like a grayscale image, like it is, or not grayscale. I don't know what it does actually, because it also is used for a normal map, which is not grayscale. But anyways, yeah, we set it to that, and now it is reading correctly. So we can see that the some parts of it are shiny and some parts of it are more chalky, and that is this is what the map looks like, by the way, up close. It's black and white. The white parts are going to be what is seen as more like sharper reflection, and the darker parts are going to be the chalky bits. So when we see that, it is exactly that effect. And by the way, if you wanted to see what a map looks like, it's Control-Shift left click on it, provided you have the Node Wrangler enabled, which you definitely should. It's the best add-on. Make sure you enable it, and then you can do stuff like Control-Shift click and preview a map. At least probably until Blender gets it as a default option. I don't know why it's still an add-on, but anyways. So we've got the gloss, yay for us. Now the next thing, the final map we're going to be using is a bump map in the form of a normal map. So let's go, Shift A, texture, image texture, open, and this guy. The one that is not loading a preview because it's 16-bit in Blender. We go, oh, it's too much work. Anyways, if we Control-Shift left click on it, it might take Blender a while to like load in the map. There we go. This is what it looks like. It's purple, and which is a telltale sign that it is a normal map. And this is the bump material, obviously. So actually, like, I changed my mind. I don't think actually the 16-bit version of this image texture is worth it, because probably it will actually increase the render times, and I don't think the camera is going to be anywhere close enough to see. Like, it's mostly used for like tile, right? If you've got a reflective surface, having artifacts in the normal map can be really disruptive. But for something like this, I don't think it's necessary. But anyways, we've got it now. We've made our bed. We might as well sit in it. That's the saying. Anyways, so this is what the normal map looks like, and it's got to go into the normal input down there, which if we looked at that, let's just remove the roughness so we can just focus on that. It looks absolutely terrible. And in fact, it looks like something's wrong. And that is because it is wrong. We have the very common problem, which is to take a yellow output and then just drag it straight into a blue or purple input, which is not what you want to do. Anytime you do that, and that's like I see it a lot in beginners renders or problems, and they're like, why does this not render right? It looks black. And it's like, yeah, you should never do that. So to correct it, we need to have in here, between it, underneath vector, normal map node. So you drop this in here, and this converts it from the color information, which it currently has, into something that Blender can actually read, and now it comes through. However, it's still incorrect because color space needs to be set to non-color. And when we do that, it should finally correctly view it and give us the bump map, which is insane that you get all that detail for free. I've always thought that, like, the guy who discovered normal maps back in the day, when, like, you know, a few extra polys on a model would like drastically increase the render times, he must have been dancing for weeks when he figured it out. But like, oh my gosh, like free infinite detail that costs almost nothing in render times. It must have been a big day. Because yeah, it's free detail. It doesn't interrupt your silhouette. That's like the one thing that's when you actually have to have real geometry, is when you have detail in a silhouette. But for something at a certain level of detail, small to medium sized stuff, normal map is great for that. So there you go. Strength here controls the strength of the grain. If you were to wanted to play with that, you're welcome to. But let's add in our roughness map as well, which shows us the sharpness of the reflection, gets even better detail, and then finally the base color on top of that. Let's set that to 1. Oh, that's not the default value. This is. And this is what it looks like. So not terribly, like, not a huge amount of detail compared to what we had originally. But when the camera pans around, or when it catches the reflection, the viewer will be able to see there's slight little detail in here of the reflection, and there's bump as well. And you could increase that, like I said, to get more or less of an exaggerated effect. Ha ha ha. So that was the long way of creating a material, which I wanted to show you because otherwise you won't know what's really happening. There's a reason you use each of these maps, and that is how you use them. However, going back to our layout view, I will say that when you're using a Polygon texture, which I'm assuming most of you are following this tutorial, we have an add-on that does it for you in one click. So this is it. It's called the Polygon Material Converter, and it will create a material for you in one click. So as an example, here's a different material, which is also used for chairs. Let me just deselect these screws so that it only applies it to those. You select the objects you want. You basically select the folder where you have saved all the maps, right? All the folders of it, and then it'll read that folder, and then you just hit load and apply, and then in one click it goes bada bing bada boom, and it's done. It's added in the walnut material, and then you go to the shading tab and you can see everything is done. It's also using a special spiffy node, and you've got the controls to adjust the normal strength and the roughness strength in like one little thing. If you want to see what it's doing inside, it's doing all this stuff. But yeah. So if you want to use that, I'll put a link in the description where you can download that add-on. It's definitely handy because it does it all in one click. And you can go like, oh, let's give it a material. And you can get materials very quickly. Anyways, I'm going to go back to the chair that we just created. And then go Control-L, copy from material. There we go. Cool. All right. So now finally, the other thing that needs a material is going to be our screws. So looking at our reference photos, if I can pull it up, I mean, that's the dark chair, but it's going to be the same material basically. It's a gray, it's basically steel, right? It might be perceived to be like black or something just because of the way that the light is hitting it in this reference photo, but we're going to treat it as steel. So assuming you have watched my principled tutorial to understand it, but metallic materials, they look very different in that there is no diffuse or color to a metal. It all comes from its reflection. So very technical, but anyways, we're going to add a new material for this. We'll call it the Allen screw. Okay. And the first one we want to change is metallic. So I'm going to set that all the way to 1. And then the other big thing is the roughness. It's far too like chalky. So I want to make it I mean, it's still got a little like a pitted metal texture probably. But something closer to that. I don't know, somewhere between a 0.1 and a 0.2. That's pretty good. Okay. And I'll also just set this exact same material for all of them. And then select my last Allen screw, Control L, materials. And now they are all copying it. Haha. Okay. Great. So now that's the Allen screw texture. Very simple. We want to add another material to this inner part, right? This is where we're doing the laziest part of our material properties, but we're giving it, we're just going to pretend. We're going to fake it so that it looks as though that is a hole, like a small hole in the screw, even though there isn't one. And we're going to do that by adding a new material underneath it. We'll call this Allen screw hole. I'm going to hit assign, which is going to assign it to just that part of the mesh. And then I'm going to make this a black color with no specularity. And that's important. It's pretty much the only time you would want to do that because, if a lot of people think like when they're making a material like here that, oh, the way I change my reflectivity is with the specular value. But when you're using a PBR workflow, which is what this is, you don't need to change that. Every material has the same reflectivity, which is kind of weird to think about. A brick and a mirror has the same reflectivity. The only thing that differs is the roughness, the roughness, which changes your perception of the reflection. So it looks like it's a different reflection, but actually it's the same reflectivity, but it's just far more diffused. Anyways, that's kind of the science of it. I'm working on a photorealism tutorial that talks all about like kind of like the science of lighting and materials, and that might explain it in more detail. But anyways, for now, that's the best I can do. The point I was trying to get to was that this is probably a rare occasion where we are faking a hole in something. So actually we are changing the specular value. So it's a rare moment where we actually do that. Anyways, now I've done that. In order to copy that, like if I was to copy the material from there, you would probably find that this doesn't change. And that's because we've got two materials, but now this mesh doesn't know where that second material is applied to. So what we can actually do is select everything, and then select our last one here. And rather than copy the material, if we hit Control L, we can copy the object data. And when that happens, that means that any changes done in the edit mode over here, it'll be, oh, that's a terrible chair. Hey, what a nightmare. It'll reflect it across everything. So, yeah. And in fact, if you want to like avoid having to like copy an object, Shift D is to duplicate something, but Alt D will duplicate it and link it together. So you can see that it's linked when you go to the object properties, and you can see that there's a number next to it, which means that it's copying data from another object, sharing data. Anyways, but that's it. Ha 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 ha. We have our screws in place and our chair looks lovely. So the only other thing I want to change is the height and the dimensions of this chair, because when we added in the blueprints and we just kind of modeled it from that. But everything in Blender has a real world scale, which you can find by hitting N in the properties, going to item, and then seeing the scale of it here. So we can see that our chair is currently over 4 meters tall, which would make this an incredibly large chair. Which, you know, it's not a problem in a vacuum when you're working like this. Like, sure, why not? Just keep it at the current height. But when you add it to a scene And you know how annoying it is when you're working on something and then you import a model and it's completely the wrong scale and you got to like change everything. It's so much easier when you've set the scale for everything correctly, and then when you import and reuse assets, they all come in at the right scale. So much easier to work with. So we want to get into the habit of doing that. So our chair has a real measurement. If we go to the site, we can see that underneath the details, it tells us the specifications. So the one that I want to use is right here. The height is 79.5 centimeters, or I guess because it's European, they put a comma, which always confuses me. So I'm like, wow, a 7-meter chair, that's pretty big. Anyways, 79 centimeters, right? But that is the height, not just of this portion, but all the way up to the tippity top of here. So how to measure that when you have not just the height here, but all the way up from two separate objects? Well, actually, can you check the height of both things underneath item? No, you can't. Right, it only measures the last one. So I just thought I'd verify that. But there's a measure tool here, which if you click it, it enables you to drag, gizmos are hidden, right? Click and drag up and it creates a ruler. The problem is that then when I want to go to like scale something, the ruler temporarily hides, which is really annoying. So it kind of makes it useless. So I very rarely ever use the ruler. I'm not a fan of it. I know you can get like measurement view on the actual things somewhere in here. I guess in edit mode, you can view the edge length and all that kind of stuff. But it's not going to help us because we got two objects. So what I generally do, point is, all this I'm trying to say, is that is why I just add in an object and I make it my ruler. So this is a cube. And I'll just move it in increments so that the origin point is directly at the base of my cube there. Then let's clear it with Alt-G, clear its location. That puts it exactly right in the middle there. So I know it's now touching this bottom line here, which is another way to like standardize an asset, make sure that it's on a line. And then right here, this Z value here is the height of my cube. So I now know this is going to be my ruler in height. So I want to set that to 79.5 centimeters and hit enter. You can see you can type in any unit system into the field here and it'll correct it to meters or whatever it is supposed to be. Now these two are going to throw it. So I'm going to scale this along everything except the Z axis by hitting S and then Shift Z. So you put Shift before with an axis and it'll scale it on every axis except that one. So Shift Z, scale Shift Z, and that is my yardstick. That's my little ruler. So this is how high this chair should be. So now I've done that. I'm gonna move that's another thing I need to do. Make sure that all of these assets are parented to something. I usually just parent it to the biggest, most obvious part of the chair, which in this case is the chair leg. So I'm gonna hit Control P and then click Object, Keep Transform. Keep Transform, by the way, I think is like, if it had an origin or it was like, sometimes things move around if you just don't hit Keep Transform. So anyways, now some of these relationship lines, that's what these are. They're kind of like going out to nowhere, and that's because the origin point was sort of arbitrary. So I'm also going to clear my origin points for all of these and just go origin to geometry. And when you do that, you can see that the origin points are where they probably should be. Cool. Now, do I want to keep my origin there? Okay, for the chair, what I'm going to do is put my origin right down here. I might actually just do it between the legs. So with two faces there selected, if I hit Shift S, then go cursor to selected, it's going to move my cursor there. And then if I right click and go origin to 3D cursor, now that's where the chair stems from. I don't know how relevant that was or if that's even a good idea, but to me it makes sense to put it like on the floor of something so that now when I move something up and I'm moving this around, if I want to clear it and put it on the floor again, when I hit Alt-G, the whole object goes there, whereas if the origin was up there, it would be in the middle. So yeah, it does actually kind of help it to have it there. Yeah, I convinced myself. All right, so now to scale everything down to that, I just take my chair and I scale this down until it's somewhere in the vicinity of my little ruler here. And that's that. Ta-da! So I can remove my ruler. And now the final thing really is to name everything. So this is as simple as, like, the whole point of doing this, by the way, you might think like, oh, why are you spending time wasting time on naming things? It's so that when you add this in a scene, when you've got 1,000 other assets in there, you don't have like a material list that reads like material 0050 or whatever, and like everything should have a name so you know which materials are what. So this is chair, Soborg, pine, or it's oak. That's right. I'll call it oak. So I know that that's what that is. And then I've got, I guess I would just add chair, Soborg. This is teaching you the production workflow. They should probably teach at school, right? Like, you know, if you're working at a studio, you should get into the habit of naming everything. And all the kids are like, boring. But, you know, it is actually kind of important. So anyways, the most important parts are to name just probably the main elements of the chair. So I'm going to put chair Soborg in front of everything and then just call it slat, Control V, slat 2, etc. So we're going to do that for the rest of the mesh. And there we go. So now when we go up to the properties here, you'll only see one object when you've got something parented to it. You have to click this little drop down and then you'll see all the other objects underneath it. But you can see everything has a name. Everything should have a material name. And if you were to use this in production, people would be happy because things are named properly. And the other final thing that I would do is put this in a collection. So my references that are right here, I don't need them anymore. This was the size of our chair when we added it, so we can remove that. I'm going to clear this with Alt-G to put this right in the center here, and then I'm going to give this a name. Chair, Soborg, Oak. And then I can delete my archive here. Delete hierarchy is what enables you to actually delete something with all the objects in it. Very annoying. But that's it. So now, now this blend file, now that I've saved it, I've named everything correctly, and it's inside one collection, what that means is when I create another scene here, I can then go File, Append, find my chair that I just saved, and then hit Collection, and then just append in the collection, and now everything is there. Everything is set up, and it is ready to go. So that's how you make a chair. Hey, we did it. Well done on making it through 9 parts of this series. That's the chair. So if you want to render this guy, I'm going to do a tutorial. The next part is just going to be rendering it. So setting up studio lighting and getting that infinite backdrop kind of look, how to render it properly with a little bit of ambient occlusion, the right number of samples, denoising, all that stuff, so that you can get a final polished image. But how does yours look? If it doesn't look like this and you wanted to check what you did wrong, I'm giving you a chance to purchase this model here, and also in doing so support the channel. So it's on here, it's on Gumroad, it is $5, and like I said, you'll support the channel, and also you'll actually get some educational material in the form of the finished project file that I've been doing for this entire tutorial, so that you can download it, see what you did wrong, or see how things could be improved. But that's it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next part as we render this guy.